So now that we're back, right, we'll take a moment to talk about, maybe some issues, right? Like, what do we do about a recruitment kind of problem, right? So the biggest thing, like, if you look up like a, traditional police applicant process, right? So there are a few things that, are always going to be there. So one, there's always going to be, like this interview board for what happens, right? Where you speak in front of police officers and they're going to give you scenarios based off of it, right? Or a lot of them do that. When I remember um, when there was a time when I thought I was going to be a police officer, and I remember one of the questions was like, suppose like there's a person, like who's hurt and it's your partner and they're behind the fence, and then someone is taken off, and like has shot the police officer, and you have this active fleeing felon. You can't get to this other person, so you either have to decide you're going to climb the fence and help your buddy, or you're going to like pursue this felon, right? And like, I'm not sure what that question is supposed to like, like get at from like an applicant perspective, right? But we have these interview questions, right? Or another one is what often comes up: with, could you arrest your family member? And like it was up. And I've had family members like that have been in jail and been arrested, so I don't. Well, it's also like, why not just get someone else, right? It seems like these are practical questions, that could easily be resolved, but like, I don't know. I guess I just want to see how you answer uncomfortable questions. But related to that too, right? They usually advertise like a psych exam as well as like a background check. Whoops. They also, really like to focus on things too, where you're doing the psych, you're doing the background check, right? They will look at your like dexterity. They'll do like a medical background, and they'll also do a physical fitness test, which is what we're going to focus on right now. So historically, if you think about like a physical fitness test, right? Like there used to be. I was looking through it, like looking through it, and it's much more involved now than it used to be. Like for example, like when I thought I wanted to be a police officer, I'm interested in police, but I'm not, an officer, right? I remember like you had to do like a 1.5 mile run. Why is it hitting undo? I don't want to undo. Mile run, and you had to do that like in 12 minutes, right? Or something like that, right? Yeah, 12 to 14. I mean, they changed it based off of your age or something like that. You had to do something to like 32 sit-ups in a minute. It couldn't be like a crunch, right? It had to be like a full sit-up, right? And then, you think like push-ups, right? I mean, they changed it a little bit, but there's like a bare minimum, but it was like you had to do like 36 push-ups along with like, this like mental competency exam and, all this other kind of stuff, right? Now, the thing that's interesting, right, is that if you have not attempted this, right, that kind of thing, like this is like pretty involved. I don't know how many of you have tried to do like 36 push-ups, without like breaking or anything. But it's kind of hard to do if you're coming off the couch, especially, right? But this used to be this kind of thing, right? Is that these have nothing to do with like like this doesn't predict your like competency in the field. It also doesn't predict like how you handle people. And so it also doesn't like look at your duration of your career, things like that, right? But there's like this interesting like little phenomenon that is true when we think about like applicants, right? So there was a study that was done to look at like male and female applicants, for any kind of prospective jobs, right? Or if you want to go for like a promotion, right? And so they were looking at, so if you have like a list of requirements that put into place, right? So if you have just a whole series of, you want the ad, right? Men are more likely, like, they'll take a gamble. You're more likely to take a gamble for a position because more often than not, men will apply if they have 60% of the desired qualifications. They're really like, screw it, bug it. I'll make it happen. I'll make it mine, right? No problem, right? But if you think about female applicants, right, they're only likely going to apply if they have 90% of the qualifications. And so what ends up happening, right, is if you consider something like this physical stuff, right, it's really like interesting. Is that like they will come in and they will like they won't even apply, won't even take that gamble, right? Because they feel like they're unqualified, right? Because they have to do that, right? This disparity is incredible, right? Because if you think about issues related to promotion for any kind of thing or career jobs, right? If dudes are this mentality, like, yeah, whatever, I'll just go for it, but like women feel like they have to wait and hold back, right? That limits a lot of career advancement and applications to a lot of kind of jobs, right? So one way to do this, right, is that oftentimes, although not always, right, if you think about this in a policing context, police will have different physical standards, like physical fitness standards, based off of men and women, right? Because again, none of these things, they might predict that you can do the physical fitness like in the academy, but like in the typical day-to-day job of being a police officer, like they don't matter, right? And I'm sure if you can stereotypically think about like the overweight cop eating donuts, right? Like clearly they're allowed to be on the force, so it must not matter that much, right? Um, so one way that they end up trying to recruit things, right, or like make it seem more invitation because they wouldn't believe they have to meet this physical standard or they're being held to the same physical standard as a male, you're less likely to have applicants, right? Period, which is already the problem, right? So this manipulation and then accounting for this, right, is designed to encourage applications. But this also has like kind of a problem in this case, right? Because you're encouraging more women and more women are selected, say, over some male candidates. This creates like a sort of like feedback problem where and this is, I guess, this is one of the privileges of being like a white male, right? Is that or I guess it's a harm too, but like it's more of like a privilege, right? It's like if I don't get something, I think it's because I suck. Like I don't have to, I don't ever have to deal with like the idea that maybe they did it because like I'm black or because I'm a woman, right? Like I'm just like, I did it because I suck. But I also have this feedback problem that if I don't get something, right, some people, I am not taking this point of view, but the feedback is like, oh, this is a quota or diversity hire, and that's why I didn't get it right. So there's kind of like you're being like unfairly penalized, even though they want to hire you. They're finding ways to like encourage applications, right? People have you're not held to the same standard, or things are different, and you only got this because of like your gender or your race or things like that, right? So there's this interesting dynamic that comes into play when we think about it, right? So that's one way to get applicants, right? But like, this creates a problem of like, how do you recruit more women? Because again, as we've outlined, um, the benefits of it to a police department. So how do we go about actually doing that? The other aspect, right, is like, how do we change a police department to be more welcoming or inclusive of for women and more and other interesting groups of interest for like diversification, such as cross race ethnicity or LGBTQ identity and so on, right? But for this week, since we're talking about women in policing, for female candidates. So for this particular week, then, right, you also have to consider, right, like, so what does it also, you have to think about promotion aspects. So how do we encourage more representation within like supervision and leadership? And because again, like if you think about most of like what happens in a job, right, there's a lot of conflict resolution and dealing with people. You're not necessarily running a gun and like arresting bad boys and taking them down and all that stuff, right? It's far from like a typical day in policing, right? The thing is like people aren't aware of it, right? So how do you change this perception of policing, of what real police work is, and get more applicants, right? How do you do that? So this is kind of what fills out the rest of the week. This module and kind of forms like part of like the case study assignment. So, I guess I'll see y'all around.